What's the most fascinating wine region you haven't heard of yet, but you should visit? Why are traditionally aloof wineries in regions like Bordeaux becoming more friendly and open to visitors? And how can you make the most of your next trip to a wine region? You're going to get those stories and more in our conversation with our guest, whom I'll introduce momentarily. However, if you're watching this video on the replay, please get into the comments and type the word replay, or let me know what's in your glass, what the weather's like. I'd love to hear from you. And similarly, if you're here on the live stream, please get into the comments. I'm Natalie McLean, and you've just joined one of the most passionate groups of wine lovers who gather every Tuesday at 7 p.m. to talk to the most interesting people in the world of wine. Now, this is the first time I'm live streaming it, but this video is based on a recording I made for my podcast, the Unreserved Wine Talk. However, I will be here live in the comments responding, so get in there, ask questions. What stories are you enjoying? What tips do you like? I want to hear from you. All right. Before I introduce our guest, let me say that two of you will win a copy of her terrific new book about traveling to wine regions. She is the editor of the book. It is a compilation of essays. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and let me know you'd like to win, and I'll choose two people randomly from those who contact me. All right, back to our guest. Amy Wislocki has more than 30 years experience in publishing, having worked at the senior levels for leading companies in the consumer, business-to-business, and contract publishing arenas. In 2000, she joined Decanter as magazine editor, as well as overseeing content planning and production for the print publication. She has also been involved in developing digital channels, Decanter.com and Decanter Premium. And she joins us now from London. Welcome, Amy. We're so glad to have you here with us.
I'm delighted to be here. Hello.
Hello. All right. So you've had quite a career, Amy. Let's start with that pivotal moment 25 years ago when you joined Decanter magazine. I would say the world's most influential, most prestigious wine magazine, and you were just 27 years old. So what was it like? What was the process like? Did you have to go through some interviews? I mean, and what turned you toward, I think I'll become editor of a wine magazine?
So at the time I was working for a contract magazine publisher, Redwood, and I was editing a quarterly magazine that went to smaller, medium-sized enterprises for BT, the telephone company.
Right.
And it was in the heyday of publishing, taxis everywhere, would never have dreamed of getting the tube, long lunches, quite easy because it was a quarterly magazine. And, it was a very nice, glamorous, easy existence. But I just felt that I was too young to coast it and that I needed to have more of a challenge. So I decided it was time to look for something else. And wine was my major passion, even back then. So I thought, okay, what would be my dream job would be to combine wine and what I know about, which is editing magazines. So at the time, there were only two real wine magazines on the shelves. Now there's only one, Decanter, but at the time there were two. And so just fortuitously, I learned of that both magazines were looking for an editor at the same time. And I was interviewed for both roles. And I got to the second place for the other wine magazine, which is now no longer existing. So lucky that I didn't go there. And I got the job at Decanter. But yes, lots of interviews and very terrifying.
Was it? Yeah, I bet. You're only 27. And wow, I mean, wine has this social stigma as it is, and you're young, even though it's your passion. What was the interview process like? Were there multiple interviews? Were they all scary suit people, or what was it like?
There were. See, at the time, when I was first interviewed for the job, I didn't know it at the time, the publishing company that owned Decanter said they were going to launch a new magazine about wine for more at beginner level. So I probably wouldn't have even applied for the job at Decanter because I would have just assumed that it would be, that they'd be looking for somebody with more wine knowledge. But so they said, oh, this is going to be a new magazine for beginners. And so I had to come up with concepts, etc., etc. Anyway, went through that interview process. And then that all went quiet. And then a few months later, they said, actually, that's no longer happening, but would you like to be interviewed for the job as editor of Decanter?
Wow.
And the publishing director, Sarah Kemp, she in the end, she worked there for 30 years. She was an incredible woman, very formidable, very knowledgeable, very strong character. And she interviewed me. And I remember coming out of one of the interviews. It wasn't the first interview, but it might have been the second or third interview. And I remember thinking, wow, I phoned my mum. I was walking along the street back to the station. I said, oh, I really screwed it up. I really wanted that job. I really screwed it up. And I was convinced that, that was it. And I ended up getting the job.
Wow. Wow. That's a tribute to your own modesty. So, what was the first thing you did to establish your credibility as this young editor at this prestigious magazine? What were your first moves?
I mean, I'm not really that kind of person that will come in and start, making myself presence felt and all that. So I just came in and just wanted to get to know the people who work there and to see what their different talents and skills were, and just to bring out the best in people. And, I'd done wine courses for my own interest already. And I knew about magazines and I felt comfortable with editing a magazine. So at the end of the day, and I don't see myself, obviously I've worked at Decanter for 25 years and I've learned a certain amount about wine in that time. And compared to obviously lots of people, I probably do know much more than them about wine. But I don't see myself as a wine professional. I'm not a master of wine. Most of my writers know, more about their specialist areas in wine than I do. I'm a magazine editor. So, and I felt comfortable as a magazine editor. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that makes sense. You had your expertise. But
exactly.
Tell us about one press trip you went on to Chile. What were the adventures you had there?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, in the past I did quite some amazing trips. I was very lucky, and we did go to Chile. And as part of that trip, we were taken by one of the wineries up a mountainside for a beautiful picnic. Overlooking lovely views, etc., etc. With obviously drinking their nice wine. And then they said, "Oh, would you like to ride a horse? Have a little ride on the horse?" And I said, "Well, I've never ridden before." And they were like, "No, no, no, the horse is very docile or tame, or it'll be fine, just." So I thought, okay, why not have a go, new experiences and all that. So I got on the horse, and then obviously my horse just chose to kind of decide to bolt down the mountain, and I was absolutely terrified. And somebody had to ride up behind me and grab the reins of this horse and make it stop. And I could just imagine their horror, if they'd killed the editor of Decanter. It would have been good,
that would have been very good press coverage. Yeah. She said she liked the wine before we last saw her go off into the sunset, but who could argue with that? That sounds terrifying. Only humorous in retrospect, I'm sure. So you, as editor of Decanter, now celebrating its 50th anniversary,
right.
You've had a front row seat to the evolving world of wine journalism. What's the one aspect of wine writing or criticism that you believe is often misunderstood or maybe undervalued by wine readers?
I think a couple of things, really. I would say probably that scores, there is this fixation on scores. And, I understand that scores are useful to people. I get that. And I think that's fine. And they are useful. But I think people just sometimes don't look beyond that and don't really realize the importance of what the critic is saying besides the score. So like their tasting notes about the wine,
right.
and also, finding a palate that you align with. So obviously everybody has different tastes. Everyone has different palates. So it's just, recognizing the fact that some wine critics will like the same kind of wines that you do. Some critics will like different type of wine. So trying to kind of actually take time to read the tasting notes and realize. And I think the other thing would be really that some people just underestimate the value of actual knowledge and expertise and experience. And at the end of the day, that's why Decanter has this amazing reputation, because we really, and not just in the magazine, but like with our awards, it's now like the world's biggest wine competition. We use the real experts on their regions who really know the wines and have tasted the wine over the years. So, if they're tasting the latest release of, one of the top Bordeaux wines or one of the Super Tuscans, they can think in their mind, oh yeah, well, this is how it's different to the last vintage or the last five vintages. They'll know the wine intimately, they'll know the other wines of the region. So it's
Right.
just that valuing, and I'm not saying it's not good that wine is more democratic now, and obviously there are lots of people, it's more accessible, and there's wine everywhere on social media and everything, and that's great. But it's just recognizing the value of real expertise and experience, I think.
Absolutely. It's why, I mean, I'm based in Ottawa, Ontario, but I subscribe to a number of newspapers, including the New York Times. And Decanter reminds me in some ways of the New York Times in terms
Mm,
of credibility, expertise, trust. There's so much free
trust.
info. I think there's more need than
Yeah,
ever to have
exactly.
trusted publications and to pay for them, for the work.
Yeah,
So, yeah, but we're
yeah.
preaching off the same whatever song sheet. But yeah, no, I would underscore your point. Now, the biggest decline in wine consumption, as you know, has been among members of Gen Z. How are you trying to re-engage them without alienating your traditional readers, your older readers?
How long have you got? I mean, yeah, I mean the Gen Z thing, yeah, there is that trend towards a lot more of them are not really drinking as much, but I think some of that is around what they can afford, partly. So I think as they get older, there is some evidence that, they will kind of re-engage with wine. And
Mm,
some of them are interested. I guess it's just it's many things. I mean, recognizing that as a trend, moderation as a trend. So our next issue, which comes out at the beginning of June, the cover story is about moderation. Now, that's quite a big thing for a
yes.
newsstand wine magazine to lead with a story on moderation. And it's a tricky one to get right, and you don't want to be preaching to people. You don't, and people who think I'm buying a wine magazine because I love wine, I don't want to be made to feel guilty for drinking wine. This is
Right.
my refuge. But it's not about that. It's not about trying to make people feel guilty. It's about recognizing a trend that even among wine lovers, people are trying to kind of think about how and when and where they're drinking, how much they're drinking. So it's how do you navigate that as a wine lover? So it's being prepared to recognize these trends. So in the end, we did a cover. So the cover line, I put a lot of thought into it, and we have the word pleasure quite large on the cover line along with that. So hopefully we've struck the right chord. But yeah, so it's about recognizing the things that they're interested in, and
Mm-hmm.
also it's a balance. Obviously, there are some things that they will want to read about that are more traditional conservative readers not they might not all be so bothered about. So things like natural wines, for instance.
Sure.
Some of our more conservative readers are not interested in natural wine, but when we think about it, it's all a balance, and we think of ourselves as having kind of three types of readers. So we have them in our mind. They have names. We have Joe, Stefan, and Richard. And when we kind of plan our content, we're thinking about those three readers and which reader is this aimed at, and trying to kind of serve all of their needs at the same time. And obviously, some bits of the magazine are going to be pitched maybe to below the knowledge level of our long-term connoisseur readers, and some things won't be of interest if we're writing about en primeur, first growths, tasting notes en primeur. That's not going to be relevant to some of the Gen Z readers, but it's all a balance, isn't it? And trying to give something
Yes.
to everybody.
Absolutely. You mentioned Joe, Stefan, and there was one more.
Richard, yeah.
Richard. What about Emily, June, and Mary? are,
Well,
are most of your readers men?
no, Joe was a woman. I know.
Oh,
I
Joe
thought
is a
that.
woman.
I thought that
Okay.
in advance when I thought Joe was not a good choice of name because it should have been a name that was clearly a woman. But yes, Joe is a woman.
Okay.
So
Got it.
yes,
All
and
right.
more of our readers are women, and people who come to our events. There are growing, thankfully, female wine lovers as well, as you
Excellent.
know, I'm sure.
Absolutely. That's a big change too. So you're writing about moderation. Do you review low and no alcohol wines? I'm just curious.
Well, it's funny you should say that because we've been discussing it. I mean, we do articles, we do sometimes write about that kind of thing, but
Mm,
so far, so we don't put them into our database online,
okay.
but we have just decided to start including the occasional no and low recommendation in our kind of weekday wine selection because like you say it's such a massive thing, it's stupid to
Yeah.
pretend it doesn't exist. So I think just to have the odd one included is probably a good thing.
I think so. There's a real demand for it, and then there's a real
Oh, it's
industry argument that it's not real wine if it doesn't have alcohol. But that's another podcast. Um, so, publishing is known for short tenures in terms of how long writers and editors stay with a publication. 25 years. What's made you want to stay with Decanter that long?
I mean, it's like when people say to me, "How long have you been at Decanter?" And I almost feel embarrassed sometimes saying 25 years, but to be honest, I mean, it sounds corny, but I mean, what better job? Like if you're an editor and you love wine,
Yes.
I mean, I can't think of a better job than being editor of Decanter. I've had some amazing experiences. I've met some amazing people. I get to drink wine that I could never afford to buy with my own money. And I work with some great people, and I'm really proud to be part of the brand. So why would I want to go anywhere else? And actually, even if I did, from a practical sense, it's much harder to make a living. It's this day, as you know, these days, it's not easy to make a living as a freelance writer or editor.
Absolutely.
Even if you're a great writer or you're really talented, it's a hard living. So
It
I feel
is.
very privileged and lucky to be where I am.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about the Ultimate Wine Travel Guide, this new book that's coming out. It will be available when this podcast is published in June, everywhere, not just in the UK, but Canada, the US, worldwide, presumably Amazon, the booksellers, and so on. What's one myth about wine travel that you hope this book dispels?
I think the main thing is that it has to be an elitist thing, because I
Right.
suppose wine in general has the elitist kind of associations, and I think it's just getting across that you don't have to have tons of money and only drink the world's finest wines to enjoy wine travel. It's just becoming much more accessible to everyone, and in so many more regions and countries than it was.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's
that's probably the main
the big
message.
one. Okay, great. Um, and I love that phrase. I think it might have been one of your writers who said, standing in the landscape is a way to understand wine. Andrew Jefford might have said
Andrew
that.
Jefford, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he's so poetic. What do
yes.
you think that means in concrete terms? Is that the difference between tasting wine at home and reading about a place versus standing where it's made? I mean, what's going on there?
I mean, I think anybody who's visited a vineyard and been on a kind of wine holiday will understand that there's no substitute. And it's about any vineyard that you actually visit, you will have a different relationship with that wine, for the rest
True.
of your life, because when you go there, and it is partly about the actual physical environment, see, and the lucky thing is that wine growing areas are often, the most beautiful areas of the world. Not always, but often,
Yeah.
they are the most beautiful areas of the world. And standing there, you see, you might be in a vineyard, you see, or how it might be on a steep slope. You can see what type of soil it is, like the topography. You can feel the climate. It might be very near to the ocean with the cooling breezes. So that side of it will really give you a better understanding of why that wine tastes like it does. It could be like you see the age of the vines. They might be really old vines that are producing, fruit with lots of character, but also meeting the people behind the wine. It could be a small family-owned winery. Hearing the stories associated with the wine. Um, Actually, part of it is the sheer thing about availability. Lots of lots of the most interesting, amazing wines might not even be available outside of that region or outside of the
Right.
country. Some of them don't really get exported. So it's partly
Hmm.
about, if you think of somewhere like Switzerland or something, where most of the great wines don't make their way outside of Switzerland. They've got a massive market within the country. And
Hmm.
then it's also things like drinking them with the food of the place, and in that environment. It's a kind of irreplaceable experience, I think, in
It
so many
is.
ways.
Absolutely. I again underscore your point because I have a much deeper connection to wines where I've visited the place, maybe talked to the winemaker, tasted the wines. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just there's more senses that are engaged. It's a deeper laying down of memories or something. I don't know what it is, but it's powerful.
yeah, very
So
powerful.
yeah. Um, was there? like I understand that this book is based on a compilation of essays that have been published in Decanter, but you've curated them, written the foreword, put them together in this beautiful package with the photos and everything. But when perhaps the original essays were being written, which region gave you and your writers maybe the greatest challenge editorially to do the story, maybe based on language or access or complexity or some other aspect?
I mean, generally, we have our stories written by either people who live in the region,
Okay.
who know the region very well, or people who visit the region often, so that they have that genuine kind of insider knowledge, so they can usually navigate it okay. So the challenges usually occur when we are editing the story, when we're checking the facts, for instance, and going and trying to get pictures, because obviously some regions, and especially like the tiny wineries, often they don't even have a website, yet they don't speak English. So trying to verify anything sometimes can be very difficult. And obviously some regions are a lot more slick than others, and some will have kind of associations that can help you with that, kind of wine tourism bodies, and some won't have anything like that. So
Sure.
yes, it's often the kind of smaller, more emerging ones where that's more challenging.
Sure, that's understandable. Um, and is there one particular story from the book that made the strongest impression on you? Like, I'm sure you love all your children, all your essays, but is there one that stands out, or one that comes to mind off the top of your head now?
I think they stand out for different reasons. I mean, like, so some of them, even as editor of Decanter, there's some regions that I haven't explored as widely as I would like to. So there are some that stand out just because I just think, oh, wow, I really want to do that. And it is a beautiful kind of coffee table book with lots of nice glossy photos and things. So you do kind of look. So
What
somewhere
would be an
like,
example of that? Yeah, go ahead.
well, like, like Alsace, I have been there once, but oh, what a region, like I love the wines of Alsace, beautiful towns. I love like choucroute and stuff, like the food and everything. So countryside, so yeah, Alsace, that one's a good one. I'd love to go there. Tour and terrain in the Loire, that also looked lovely. And then in another way, the ones that stood out were like the we did one that was about the US wine roads less traveled, which
Okay.
included things like Idaho and places like that that you just wouldn't expect to read about in the context of wine tourism. So I think that's really a rewarding thing to read about as well, because it's something completely new.
Terrific. Um, were there any mishaps or serendipitous moments that happened
I
while
mean,
they were
I
writing? And
I mean, they may have been, which I don't know. We kind of commissioned the pieces and then they sent us the copy. So
there you
there may
go.
have been, but I mean, we did want to include Lebanon in there. And at the
Okay.
time, it was just the political situation was so bad that,
Mm,
the book company decided that it was probably the wrong time to be like suggesting that people visit Lebanon.
sure.
So that didn't make it into the book, which is a shame, but it's obviously still ongoing. And interestingly, we had a similar dilemma at the magazine because um, we had an article on Lebanon, a wine article, and it was just as it was all kicking off really badly that we were due to run this article, and we did have a conversation internally about should we still run this article, and we decided that we should because you know they're still making their wine there, and
Yes.
it's not really fair to punish them for what's happening in their country that's out of their control. And we decided that in the end it would be more of a support to include the article. But in a travel book, it's different because you're kind of suggesting people go there on holiday, and that's just not really
Right.
likely to happen. So, but yeah, I would say that that's one thing that didn't quite work out.
Yeah, good point. So the book opens with France very traditionally, but as you said, you've got emerging regions like Idaho and Colorado and North
Mm.
Carolina. Um, so it was it no, it was South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina. You included it despite the fact it has no vineyards. So why did you think that warranted a section in a travel book?
Yeah, it's funny because when someone pitches you an article on something like that, obviously your instinct is to think, why would we have an article on Charleston in the magazine? But if they make a good case for it, I mean, at the end of the day, as what people, wine lovers visit all parts of the world. They're not only visiting wine regions. And
True.
so, wine lovers, they want information on how to get the most out of a place wine wise, even, so that's why we publish quite a few city guides as well. And I think there are two or three in the book as well, city guides. Um, because there might still be, you still want to know where are the really exciting wine bars, where are the restaurants with the best wine lists, et cetera, et cetera. Has it got a very vibrant, budding wine scene? So, I mean, ideally, obviously, it's nice to go to a city that's within striking distance of vineyards, so you can mix it up. But it is also useful to know just straight, where do I go to drink wine in Charleston? Where do I go to drink wine in Madrid or wherever? It's useful
Sure.
information.
And for Canadian listeners, you also include Vancouver Island.
Vancouver. Oh,
So
that looks so beautiful. I've
it
never been,
does.
but it looks
Okay.
so stunning. And that
Yeah.
I remember particularly, I think we talked about one restaurant. Was it called Alpina or something? I think it
Okay.
was in a
Oh,
Erie
Tofino?
resort.
Tofino?
No, I think it
Maybe?
was called
Was it
Alpina. Anyway, it was
Oh,
the
Alpino. Okay.
view just looked incredible, and I'd love to go
Oh, yeah.
one day.
People are going to have to get the book to know which one that was. Yeah, no, that's great. Um, and what were some of the most off the radar places that were included? Like you would never
Well,
imagine.
I guess Charleston. I mean, I
Oh,
guess those
okay.
the US places to the US up and coming wine regions were probably to me. I mean, even things like Georgia, I mean,
The
some people
country,
wouldn't be
not
so
the state.
the yes, sorry, yes,
Yes.
exactly. The country Georgia. Even that nowadays is becoming more recognized as a kind of as a wine region and as a kind of amazing destination. So, but yeah, so we do
Yeah.
have an article on Georgia.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and it's the cradle of winemaking history,
yeah.
8,000 years. And why do you think that wine lovers, more broadly speaking, don't realize that? Why is that story not as well known, perhaps, as it should
I
be?
mean, I think it is getting more visibility now in the UK at any rate. I don't know about where you are, but I guess it's because like the availability of the wines hasn't been,
True.
and probably the quality because during communism, the wines were not very good. So I guess it's still quite, even though it's an ancient wine civilization in terms of modern winemaking and quality, it's still probably quite a young industry, which is true of lots of places, I guess, that have only improved their winemaking since certain political regimes ended or whatever.
Sure. And
Um,
in that piece, it also talks about experiencing integrated agriculture. Um, how important is authentic cultural immersion, like staying with families or whatever, to wine travel, or is it just, I guess, different people prefer different experiences? But what's your take on that?
well, I mean, I guess you could ask that about any kind of travel that staying with a local family will give you a more authentic experience. But in wine, it's probably more the case than ever because so many of the producers will be these tiny kind of family. They might have been handed down through generations. These small vineyards, lots of regions, they're just a patchwork of tiny, tiny vineyards and wineries. So I guess that just gives you like a real insight into the real existence of it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than
Mm-hmm.
just the kind of the polished tourist trail.
Sure. And then just one more point about Georgia. It's described as a rebirth. It's described as a rebirth post-conflict. Do you think wine tourism can help preserve or resurrect cultural heritage in regions recovering from political strife?
For sure. And, I think even for quite pragmatic reasons, I'm sure like a country's government will see the benefit of promoting its winemaking as a way of bringing tourism in and as a way of kind of helping to stimulate the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's an obvious way, isn't it,
Mm-hmm.
to help grow the economy,
Yeah.
and it's an opportunity because I guess some countries, you couldn't really visit. They were kind of closed to international visitors. So now, if they're opening their doors again, it's exciting opportunity for people who want to discover new things.
Absolutely. You mentioned some really or some unique experiences like llama trekking at Divine
Yeah.
Llama Vineyards in North Carolina. Is that like using llamas to go in through the vineyards? What were they doing there?
So I haven't done it myself, but from
Yeah,
my
well, after that horse experience, I don't blame
yeah,
you.
well, yeah.
A
My
lot of llamas.
understanding is that you go on a trek and you're given your own llama on a kind of lead, and you walk.
Oh, you're
You
walking the
do
llama.
Yeah, so you do like it's like taking a dog for a walk, except it's a
Oh,
llama, and I think it's like a 2 hour walk or something, and then you feed your llama some treats, and then I mean it all sounds quite
wow.
memorable and strange, but they look quite cute and fluffy. You know, they don't look too scary.
Okay, so we're not riding the llamas, but was there another unexpected encounter, animal encounter, or anything else that was struck you as, well, that's different, a kind of activity based at a winery?
I don't know about activity, but well, I mean, I think we did write once about this piece didn't isn't in the book, but we wrote in the magazine about Thailand and their wine scene. It's another place you don't really think of as a wine destination, but you know they do make
Right.
wine in Thailand, and one of their they have sometimes they have elephants
Oh,
trampling the vines at night, which you know it's not a problem we get in the English vineyards.
right.
And you can do at one of I think it's Monsoon Valley, which is you know one of the most probably the most well known Thai wine producer. You can do like a 4x4 safari, you know, and see kind of real wildlife. And the author talks about it as I remember I think he used this phrase, Tuscany meets the jungle or something. So sounds quite different. But I mean, everywhere, even in Europe, you've got you know you've got wolves in Tuscany, and you know all kinds of things going on. And obviously in America, you've got coyote and bears in wine regions, and
Sure,
you know,
sure. And
so
they have
and
wild baboons or something in South
in
Africa.
that's
It's like
right, yeah,
all kinds of
baboons and
crazy.
monkeys in South Africa, and
Yeah,
yeah, lots of things going on.
they all love those grapes. And you mentioned one winery has a swimming pool in the middle of the vineyards, which kids love. Like, you also offer tips for families who want to travel and maybe potential activities for children, which I thought was kind of neat. Which winery had that, or which region had a
I
pool in the
can't
middle of a vineyard?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay,
I'm sorry,
I
I
have to
can't
get the
remember
book.
which winery it was.
No
But
worries.
I mean, so many wineries are now catering for families, which makes total sense. I mean, you
Yes,
know, you're unlikely as a wine lover to be going there on your own. You know,
right.
you probably are going
Sure.
with your family, or even a partner who's not necessarily into wine. Or so there are so many sophisticated things, even in like Bordeaux, which you wouldn't expect to offer that kind of thing, has got some chateaux that offer really quite sophisticated family activities like Daggersack, I think is one of them, and you know, but there are many that offer good things for children.
And you also put a lot of helpful details on logistics, like ferry ride times or whatever else you have to get. How do you keep that from getting out of date the day it's published? Are you doing an online component or something to
I
for
mean,
those details?
look, the fact is that obviously in a book format, as soon as it's published, you know, it is going to be out of date. You know, you can't help that. So, but I think what we're hoping is that the book will inspire people to make these trips. Hopefully, you know, most of the details will be correct. But I think very few people will go on holiday without actually doing their own research or checking
Checking.
things. So, and most of
Sure.
the wineries and hotels and restaurants will still be there. But yes, obviously, you might want to check the finer details if it's in a book that was published 2 3 years ago or something.
Sure. No, those
And
those
and I
details are
think
helpful.
you know articles like this and a book in the book like this, it's about getting a balance between you do want to give people practical information, obviously, and practical advice. But you also want to kind of get across the romance and the magic of a place and you know, really kind of try and evoke why you should visit this place. Why is it so special? Um, but in terms of the practical information, I mean, that's why we do. So you'll notice that lots of the articles in the book have what we call My Perfect Day. So it's a box within the article where people actually suggest an itinerary for a day, you know, so morning, lunchtime, afternoon, evening, then where you end up, you know, where you eat, where you stay the night. Because I think that's really useful because it's about knowing, and that's why it's so good to have insider knowledge because it's about knowing how to put the pieces of the jigsaw together in terms
Yes.
of like you know which winery is near which restaurant, how long will it take to go there and there, and that I
Exactly.
think is really invaluable information that's actually a doable itinerary.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, those perfect day itineraries, they're wonderful. Like there's one in Rioja. What for you makes a perfect wine itinerary? or makes it truly exceptional versus just sort of going to tasting room after tasting room, which is how a lot of people approach it?
I think it would be to mix it up a bit. Well, A, not to try and cram too much into the day because then that just becomes like too stressful and it's all bound to go wrong at some point, you know. So I guess what I would say is probably a bit of planning will help to make it a perfect day rather than assume you can just rock up and, you know, often you do kind of need to book in advance. But I would say to have a combination of things. So maybe just like even just two winery visits, maybe like one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Obviously, for
Yes.
me, having really good food
Yes.
is important as well as part of it. So, and lovely views, hopefully. So maybe going somewhere for lunch where you can sit outside and just have enjoy the beautiful views, get some fresh air. Maybe go for like maybe do a bit of activity at some point. So one of the vineyards, you might be able to hire a bicycle or go for a hike around the vineyards or something like that. So just to mix it up a bit, maybe have a bit of culture, stop off and see like a beautiful village that has some nice culture, or you can, I don't know, you know, see some of their architectural churches, or so just I don't know, just to have a mixture of stuff is I think is really nice. And that's why
Absolutely.
we do talk about, we don't only mention wineries, you know, we do say, oh, while you're here, go and see this or that, or you know, to try and bring it all in.
Right. And post COVID, I know, at least here in Canada, a lot of wineries now require reservations. You can't just show up all the time, or there might be a big busload of people there. So it does
Yeah,
pay to plan
yeah.
that, to not make assumptions that you can just walk into a winery these days.
I mean, I think some you can, especially I guess if they have a shop, you know, like a cellar door, you might be able to turn up. But even those, if they're doing tours, the tours might be full. So I think
That's true.
the norm is probably to check in advance whether you
Yeah.
need to book.
Yeah. And you also emphasize in some places off-peak travel to places like Corsica. What are the advantages? I guess lower crowds, discounts perhaps. Is there anything else that?
Well, I mean, I guess the main thing I would think of is that the winemaker, you know, they might have more time to spend with you because
Yes.
there must be certain times of the year that are really busy, not only in terms of tourists, but in terms of the winemaking and wine growing calendar. So there may be certain times of the year where they're not doing very much, and then they'll have more time to actually talk to you and explain things to you. So that
Right.
I'd say that would probably be the main benefit. And
Yeah.
maybe and I guess just actually being able to get in to some
Yes.
places, like you know the most sought after wineries, you know there might be some wineries that are just fully booked for ages, and you know if it's the
It's
most
true.
famous place in an area, it'll be easier to get access, although I guess they might not be open all around the year. You'd have to check.
Yeah. Underscore check. The book also highlights how places like Bordeaux have transformed from being sort of, quote, famous for aloofness. Grand Chateau
Yeah.
gates closed to visitors. Now estates are queuing up to welcome tourists.
Mm.
Is there a particular winery that stands out as doing this really well? Obviously, they're trying to embrace their customers more with global competition
Mm.
and that sort of thing.
I think there are so many, particularly in Bordeaux, that you could say that about because that was the image. Even when I joined Decanter, it was the image was very much of kind of closed gates and things, you know, big grand iron chateau gates.
You
And
had to know
now,
someone to make an introduction
and
for you, a
now there are
letter.
so many. Yeah, now there are so many that welcome visitors. And I mean, like for example, Pape Clement, you know, which is a kind of very well respected winery, and you know used to be kind of famous for being quite aloof, and now have very elaborate tourism offerings and even helicopter rides and all kinds of things that you can
Oh,
do,
wow.
even for families. So, and I think in Bordeaux, even more than some other regions, they're recognizing the benefits of that because, you know, the way obviously that Bordeaux is sold, they don't they don't always know who their end customer is. They don't know who's drinking their wine because it goes through so many layers of distribution before it gets to the end customer. So I think they're realizing the value of actually being able to connect with the end customers.
Right.
But it's good for us, isn't it? You know, as wine lovers, it's great trend that the wine world is opening up more.
Absolutely. Several regions, like the Margaret River in Australia and Marlborough in New Zealand, emphasize their sustainability practices. Is environmental conscientiousness or consciousness changing wine tourism in your mind? Did you see that coming through in some of these articles?
Well, we have done specifically articles about, you know, for people like, you know, doing a region by bike, for instance. So some wine regions lend themselves to being explored by bike, or, you know, you could even walk, or in some places, if it's quite close together, But then on the other hand, quite a few of the wineries are quite off the beaten track. I think, you usually do have to get out of the cities and stuff. So at the end of the day, realistically, you probably will have to use some kind of transport in many cases to get to these wine regions. But it doesn't mean that you can't prioritize, going to see wineries who have some kind of sustainable accreditation, or if you want to kind of go down that route or visit wineries who are organic or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think there's I don't know if it's in Napa Green, I think is an organization in Napa Valley, California, where you can visit all the organic or sustainable wineries. They have a wine route where you can just visit those places.
Exactly, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you
And
think,
obviously in some kind of regions, I mean, obviously like New Zealand, you've got something like what, 90% of the wineries are organic or something. That might be wrong, but I mean, they have a very high percentage of. So if that was a real preoccupation, you could, but then obviously you'd have to fly to New Zealand, which wouldn't be very sustainable. So
I know that begs the question.
It's all a trade-off.
Where do you stand on that? Do you think like you've got a book encouraging people to travel, which has many pleasures and is good for the wineries, but how does that
it's up to
mesh?
I'm not, we're not going to tell people what their own moral compass should be. I mean, if people want to, obviously, if people don't want to do that kind of travel, then they can just visit the wine regions on their own doorstep.
So local, yes.
Now even in England we've got exciting wine regions that you can visit. So they can do that if they don't want to go on a plane or whatever.
Sure. Now, you said at the last section of the book, or near the end, it's the world's 50 best wine trips, which I think people will love. Get the book for that alone. And looking at this section, you rank these based on on their popularity on Decanter.com.
So what?
Go ahead if you want to elaborate.
I was just going to say, explain how we did it. So
yes,
I mean, we essentially we took our travel articles, our travel section, and we just did a list of which of those we took the last 12 months of articles, and we looked at the page view, like hits, how much traffic the articles had got. And so then we did it in that order, basically. And and in the book, obviously, we only had room to do like a paragraph on each one. But then what we did was we created a special URL so that people could go and see the whole list of 50, and then they can click into each article if they want to read the whole thing,
Oh, great. That's great. Did any surprises emerge in terms of what wine travelers were actually interested in versus what you thought they would want in that list?
I mean, to be honest, it's pretty much, I mean, like, I think the number one was Tuscany, like wineries to visit in Tuscany, which is not really much of a surprise because, every wine lover wants to go to Italy and specifically probably to Tuscany, don't they? So, I mean, there were some quirky things on there, but,
like
obviously, well, I think we had Uruguay and like Franciacorta, for instance. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily say it's quirky, but I visited Franciacorta recently, and I just had no idea it was such a stunning place. And I remember that was on the top 50, but it's an hour from Milan, and it's stunning. And a lot of people don't even know the wine. Yeah, in northern Italy, and a lot of people don't even know the wines because 80% of the wines are not exported. So this is an example of a place where you could go and it's a stunning region, and then you can just taste these amazing sparkling wines, which are made in the same way as champagne, but don't really have the profile of champagne, well, at all.
Wow. So you've overseen, as you mentioned, Decanter's transformation from a print-only publication to one with robust digital channels, including Decanter.com, Decanter Premium. How has digital media transformed wine travel writing and the way people discover destinations, other than, of course, Googling it or asking ChatGPT? Are there other ways that the new digital world has influenced travel? I
think things come up now, don't they? So, people will be on social media and things will just come up on your feed that look beautiful, and I guess that's the advantage of the digital format, is that you get this cut. I mean, obviously it's lovely to have a coffee table type book that you can sit back with your glass of wine and flick through all these glossy photos and decide, dream about where you'd like to go. But the advantage obviously of digital is that they can show you whole reels of a place and show you video and then I guess that just inspires people then to do more research. So then they might be sparked off by something they see on TikTok or wherever, or Facebook or Instagram. And then they might go to decanter.com to, okay, oh, I saw that looks great. Let's look at Franciacorta. And then they might read the whole article. So it's all should be complementary, really.
And have you noticed a profound influence from wine influencers, or however you
Oh,
want to characterize, the TikTokers and so on?
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, they have massive profile now. They influence everything, don't they? So yeah, there is
They
a
do.
big rise. I guess and mainly in the sense that it's democratizing wine and helping to bring in a new generation of wine lovers, which is great, which is as it should be. It's easy to be kind of snooty about these things, but if it brings more people in, then that's got to be a good thing.
And in a new edition of this guide, or the next edition, or a companion, if you were to do one, what handful of wine regions would you like to see? Articles have not yet even been commissioned, but what do you think you might add to a new edition?
Wow. Well, I mean that we couldn't include everything. I mean
Absolutely.
there are wine regions that, and even maybe to see more depth. I mean, what might be really great would be to have a whole travel book on just like France or
Right.
just Italy, or and really do a like deep dive and drill down, and maybe you could have like a map of all the wine regions at the beginning, and then go around all of the wine regions and talk about all of them. Because we didn't, like with France, I don't think we've got, I can't remember, but I don't think we've got an article on Jura, for instance, or which is meant to be stunning, or there are lots of places that aren't mentioned. So that might be nice to do it more in that way.
Yeah. And do you think virtual reality or the metaverse or other tools will ever rival the real deal when it comes to wine travel?
Well, no, I mean it's not going to put a glass of wine in your hand, is it?
No, that's true. But that sense of being in the landscape, I don't think it can
Yeah, I mean
simulate, but it can't replicate. I don't think.
it's not really a substitute, is it? At the end of the day,
Yeah. No, it's not. What
like
question
it's not like watching somebody swirl a glass of wine on social media. It's not the same as taking a sip.
is drinking it? Yes. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. Is there a question about wine travel you wish people asked more frequently, but they don't?
Mm, well, I think it would be like, for me, I guess it would be, because obviously in the articles we want to try and recommend lots of places, and also catering for different budgets and yeah, different experiences, different. So for me, it would probably be, if I was talking to the authors of the articles, it would be, look, if you could just pick one, or what was the one that really stood out to you? What was the one winery? If you were going to visit one, what would it be and why? Or, just getting them to really narrow it down, or just like an insider's tip that most tourists wouldn't know. Just really like tapping on that inside knowledge.
And how do you feel? How do you want readers to feel after they've sort of flipped through this book? Even if they don't read it cover to cover, some will. But it's a beautiful book to flip through. What do you hope they take away from it?
Inspiration. I mean, at the end of the day, it is just it's escapism, isn't it? It's pure escapism sitting down with a book like that, especially if you've been sitting at a screen all day working, and you just, and hopefully people are reading it with a glass of wine at hand, and it's just about inspiring people and aspirations. It's like, I mean, it's about just having something to work towards and look forward to at the end of the day, because we all need that.
Definitely, now more than ever.
Yeah,
There's got to be
that's for
something to
sure.
aspire to, or to reward ourselves. So we wrap up. If you could share a bottle of wine with anyone outside of the wine industry, living or dead, who would that be, and which wine would you open, and also where would you want to be to share that wine with them?
Wow, lots of questions. Okay, so person first.
Sure.
So I guess if I went for like the kind of historical, like interesting figures, who I'd probably go for, like maybe like Homer, because I studied classics at university. So be quite cool to meet Homer. We could probably drink a nice Greek wine together. Or
Would
like
you
Ernest.
meet him in Greece? Like,
Oh yes, for sure, yeah.
yes, of course.
Or Ernest Shackleton. And I mean, I have always wanted to go to the Antarctic, but I think it might be a bit too cold to kind of sit and drink a bottle of wine. So maybe not there at that occasion.
A nice wine,
Or like,
maybe.
yeah, if it was somebody living, then maybe I'm quite into politics and stuff. So maybe Mark Carney, I quite fancy meeting him.
Oh, okay.
Or like Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell from this podcast that I listen to, The Rest is Politics, which is very good. Or even someone who might be like nice to look at, like Ewan McGregor or something, I could talk to. So very eclectic.
Oh,
And
you've got the whole range
I,
there. You could have a dinner party.
I know exactly. As for the wine, I mean, see, I have got like wines that I've tasted in my life, like, and really, really, they've like wow moments for me, like Aubryon Blanc. I tasted like shortly after I joined Decanter. That's an amazing wine, and I don't even think I've tried it since. Clos Santoun from Alsace, the Riesling, amazing. But or you could just have a nice bottle of champagne or something. But at the end of the day, it's not always. If I was going to be having dinner with those people or sharing, it wouldn't be about the wine, it would be about them. So I might not
Yes.
want to drink something that's going to distract too much from it. So I might just have like just a nice bottle of like rosé or like a Greek Cinnamavro or something like that.
That's practical thinking. And if you could put up a billboard in downtown London, what would it say?
Uh,
By
well, downtown
Decanter.
London, it'd probably be something like "Don't be so materialistic." Like, yeah, like that whole saying. I do like that saying. That's like, happiness is wanting what you have, not having what you want. So, because it's all in downtown London, it's also about shopping and materialism or something. Or I guess
True.
it could be something like cherish every moment, but it all sounds a bit like cliche. But something that
Yeah,
might just stop and make people like, oh yeah, remember.
right, right. Wonderful. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to mention, Amy?
Um, Not really. I mean, I guess the only thing would be, so yeah, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary decanter this year.
Congratulations.
So thank you. I mean, obviously I was only 3 when it started, but and no, actually that's not true. I wasn't 3. I was 3. Yeah, I was 3. Yes, I was 3. It's not all down to me. But it would be really interesting to hear from kind of long-time subscribers or even like new subscribers who haven't been reading the magazine very long, just about their experiences of Decanter and what they gained from it.
Sure,
I think it'd be
sure.
interesting. But
Absolutely. So if you want to get in touch with Amy, you can email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com, and I will put you in touch with Amy, and
great.
she'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I would.
And where can we find you and your magazine, your book online?
Well, obviously decanter.com is our main website, and you can access Decanter Premium from there. And so that's really the hub for everything. And Decanter is also on social media as well, obviously with Instagram and Facebook. And we've got a social media editor, so we do have our social channels as well.
Terrific. And the book will probably be available on most bookstores, I would assume,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
Amazon,
sure. I
Jack
haven't checked on
Doors.
Amazon. It probably is, but yeah. So this is
Yeah.
the book, which
Oh, there's the book.
yes,
Beautiful.
yes,
So for
which it
those who
does
are
look very
just
nice.
listening, it is a gorgeous coffee
Yeah.
table book, a hardcover, big, beautiful photos. So
Um,
definitely worth getting.
yeah. So it's called The Ultimate Wine Lover's Travel Guide.
Okay. So be sure to pick up your copy. 2 of you will win copies, but why chance it? Just get your own copy so that you have it and can start dreaming about your next wine vacation. Amy, thank you so much for this. Wonderful tips and stories. I'm going to say goodbye for now, but do not log off just yet. But thank you for your time
No,
and
thank you.
for
It's been
sharing
great
your
fun.
expertise. Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers. All right. That was